in Melbourne as well. We'll head over. That's giving me the option saying it's $25. I will select to book that ride, and you'll see that it is now searching for a driver. And then if I switch over to our driver's dashboard, you'll now see that my name here, which is new test rider, wants to go from this address to that address. Hello, my name is Lachlan Kirkwood, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to build an Uber clone entirely out of no-code using Bubble. Bubble is one of my favorite no-code tools as it gives you complete control over a custom database, as well as the ability to use dynamic data to create truly powerful software. For those of you who don't know me, I've spent the last year working with the Bubble team to write their How To Clone series. This series takes a list of the most popular products out there on the market, such as Airbnb, Uber, and Spotify, and explains how you could rebuild them entirely out of no-code using Bubble's tool. While these written tutorials were very helpful for no-code makers across the world, I had plenty of requests to recreate these as a video content. So I've gone out on my own whim, and this is exactly what I'm doing with this tutorial. Throughout this tutorial, I'll be explaining the step-by-step process for you to follow in order to build an Uber product. This will include features like creating user accounts, creating new rides, creating a price estimate for those rides, and even an algorithm to power that, dispatching rides to drivers to accept, processing payments for a ride, and then leaving reviews for drivers. So grab your Bubble editor and follow along as we build our Uber clone together. So the first feature we're going to build isn't actually a feature at all. We're going to take the time to configure our database and set up the data types and fields that we need to build the infrastructure for our Uber app. I've just got mine in a Notion doc here, so I'll be following along from this. But you'll see I've broken these down into 3 key data types. There's a user, there's a trip, and then there's a rating. So we'll go into our Bubble editor, head over to our data page, and add those data types in. So I'll add a trip, I'll add a rating, and the user data type is already added in by default. Next thing we'll do is we will head back and look at the data fields we need to add into these. So within our user, we'll be adding our user's name, a profile type, and a list of their trips that they've previously taken. Now I'm just adding these as basic fields as an MVP. You can add other data fields like a profile image or any other information like their phone number or credit card details if you want that saved. But I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible for our MVP here. So the name will be a text field. The profile type will also be a text field, and I'll explain that one in a second. And then the list of previous trips will be linked to our trip data type. And because there's going to be multiple trips they'll take, we will select that is a list of multiple entries. Then we will head back over to our Notion board here, and we'll start adding the data fields we'll need for our trip data type. So the first thing we'll need to do is add a rider and driver data field. Now this will allow us to determine which user is the driver and which user is the rider. And because these are users, we'll be linking that to our user data type. And there is only going to be one rider and one driver at a time, so this will not be a list of multiple entries. So we'll add that in. Rider, driver will be a user again, and then the remaining fields is the pickup location, the destination, and the price. So I'll add those in. Pickup location, and this will be a geographic address. Drop-off location, again, this will be a geographic address, and our price field, which will be a number value. Now, the remaining data fields we have here are going to help us create custom states within our product. And what I mean by that is it'll allow our Uber app to understand when a trip is searching for a driver, the trip is in progress, when it's complete, and when the user finally makes a payment on that. And you'll see how all of these data fields impact the way that we build our app, and I'll walk you through the step-by-step process of how we're going to use those in a second. But we'll start by adding those in first. So the first one was searching driver, and this will be a yes or no field type, and we'll need to set the default value of this to be no. The next one is in progress, and again this will be a yes or no value with the default set as no. The complete status, yes or no value with a no default, and a paid status, again yes or no value, and the default will be no. And then we're going to link a rating to this trip, and that of course will be a single rating linked to our separate data type. We'll create that, and that concludes everything we'll be adding for our trip data fields. Then we'll head back over to our Notion board and just check out the last few fields we'll be adding here under our rating. So we'll be adding a trip, a star rating, and a option for comment as well. So we'll add a trip, which allows us to link back to any trip. Just be a single trip, not multiple entries. A star rating, which will be a number value, 1 to 5 is what we'll be allocating. And then a comment field, which will be a text value. And there we have it. We have taken the time to set up all of the data types and fields we need to build our application. From here, we can go on and start to actually build out the product itself. Now that we've finished configuring our database, we can jump in and start to build out the first core feature within our Uber product. And that is going to be the function to register user accounts. Now, if we head over to our application, I'm going to create a new page here, and I'm going to call this page register. I'll then adjust the dimensions of it so it roughly looks like a mobile device. If you're building for a specific size, I'd recommend adding in those dimensions there. I also personally like to just change the color of the background to a gray, so if I'm adding any white elements, I can see where the actual parameters of the background are. And in this case, we'll be adding a function to register accounts. Now, if you're an existing Bubble user, you might be aware that they have a list of reusable elements for the sign up login process here. You definitely can use that. However, I'm going to be adding my own in this case because I'm going to want to be customizing this as an actual page of our app, whereas Bubble's existing elements are a pop-up here. So in this case, I'm just going to add some text. I'll say register an account. Just choose a font for this, H2 dark. Now, of course, you can add your own custom styles within your product for the text. I'm going to keep this as simple as possible. We'll add an input element here. I'll call this input name. We'll duplicate that 2 more times. I will then also add some more text here. Should be name. Ooh. Add another field here, which will be email. Change the name of this input to email. And this last one will be our password field. And I'll also update that name to be a password. Now we'll also need to update the content format of this to be a password, and our email will need to be an email, and of course our name can just be a text field there. The next thing I want to do is add a drop down menu here. And this will be used to allow a user to register whether they are a rider or a driver. Now, this will determine how they view the application and will store that within their data field on their account. So we will just add another heading there. Call this account type. So there, I'll then add just two options manually, a rider and a driver. And then I will add a button element. That just says register. And I will just change the styling of this to be a black background, so it looks a bit more like Uber's UI. And there we have our page. What we're going to want to do from here is begin to create our first workflow. Now, we will click, when a user clicks the register button, we'll trigger our first workflow, and we'll want to sign the user up. And from here, we're going to want to match the email fields on our page with the input value of our database here. So select email's value. We'll do the same for our password here, its value. So it's registered that user's email and password that they've added. From here, we can also go and add in any additional data fields that we would like to add. So the name of the user, of course, we've got that field on our page. So we'll add the value of that input, and then also the profile type. Now, this will be an option from the drop-down menu. And there we have it. That will register a user's account whenever they click to register that. And from there, we will need to redirect a user to a home page. So we'll head over and create another page. We'll call this home. And we won't add any content onto that yet. I just need to go back to my register page here. And back in my workflow, after a user registers, I'm going to want to send them to our home page. So we'll click a navigation event, adding it onto our existing workflow. We'll select go to page, and we'll select our home page. So now whenever a user adds their information, they'll click register. It'll register their account as the profile type and then redirect them to our home page from there. Once we've finished registering our users, we'll head back to our Notion board here, and I'm just going to tick those features off. And the next thing we'll be doing is a little bit more housework, similar to setting up our database before. We're going to want to take the time to register our Google Maps API keys. Now, this is something that sometimes isn't added into many tutorials, but I really want to take the time here and help you set these up because it can be a bit of a pain, especially if this is the first time you're doing it. So if you head over to your Bubble editor, the reason we're going to be needing to do this is because when we add a map element onto our home page, so I'm just going to quickly resize this again, change the background to be gray, make that a bit wider. And if we grab a map element here and add that in, it's currently using Bubble's API for connecting the Google Maps data into that map. Now, you will quickly get rate limited depending on how many requests you're sending through that. And you can see here now it is requesting that we add a Google Maps API key and also our geocode API key. So if you head into your settings, you'll see two inputs here that you need to add to configure your maps correctly. And the reason, of course, we'll be adding this is so we can pull and index real-world addresses. Now, if you're new to setting up API keys, just click on Bubble's documentation here, and it will take you through to this fantastic guide, which is quite simple to follow about how you can set up your own API keys. I'll jump into my own Google dashboard here. So the first thing it will want you to do is to create a new project. And in this case, I've already done so, but it's quite an easy process to do. And from there, what you'll need to do is create credentials, and you'll want to create an API key. Now, when you do this, you'll want to create two API keys as Bubble's documentation references. So here it mentions that it wants you to create, if you go down, It'll want you to create a server API key and also a client API key. And these will be used in different placeholders for your Maps API spot and the geocode API. Now, in this case, I've already created my two here. And you can see that my existing API keys are ticked and ready to register. And that's because I've taken the time to add some additional security settings, which are outlined in Bubble's guide here, just around limiting where the API requests can come from. So in my case, they're restricted to my particular Bubble URL. And once you've added those in, they will connect properly. If you have any connectivity issues, I'd recommend reading these instructions quite thoroughly and following those, as that will get you set up correctly and it should work a treat. From here, there is one last thing we'll need to do, and that is go through and enable each of these specific APIs that are listed in this Bubble tutorial. So this is our geocoding API, places API, geolocation, maps JavaScript API, and also the time zone API, which is a relatively, I guess, new one you could say. Now, don't forget this one as well, because if one of these isn't working or isn't connected, you might still have issues within your account. Now, these are super simple to enable. Just head over to your dashboard and you can just go ahead and search these ones here. So if I search for geolocation API, now I've already enabled all of mine, but you'll just need to go in and just click enable on these services. And you can see that mine's already connected. And once you've got your API keys, you can then go into your Bubble editor and add those into there. Now, just a reminder in your editor that the server API key will go with the Google Map API key here, and the client API key will in fact match with the geocode API. So once you've set that up, you'll see that the error code is gone from the Bubble debugger, and you should now be able to connect with maps and index addresses without any issues. So back in my Notion doc, I can tick off that I've configured my Google Maps API keys. One of the last bits of housekeeping we'll be creating is just a settings page where users can update their account settings. Now, this can include things like their profile photos, their credit card information, or even their name for that matter. So if we head over to our Bubble editor, I'm going to create another page, and we'll call this a settings page. Now, I won't be using this within my clone product here, but I just wanted to add this in case you are new to Bubble and you wanted to start storing more information for users to make things easier, or to provide more information and transparency between riders and drivers. So again, I'm just going to make the background of this to be gray. I'll make this roughly a mobile size screen. And then similar to our login screen that we recently created, I'm going to just start adding in a bunch of input fields here that can be used to, in this case, update their name. Let's say you've got a profile photo. We'll use a picture uploader element there. I'm trying to think what else you'd need. You might need a mobile phone number. And I'll just add some text at the top that just says that this is a settings page. Page 2. I'm just going to roughly center this. Pull that down, make that a little wider. Grab another title, and similar to our register page, just write name there. It's called name already. I'll call this one a phone. Another one can be an image, photo. And if you really wanted to store a user's credit card information for easier use, you could add their card number. and also their expiry date and CVC number as well. I'm just going to leave those blank, but you get the general idea of what I'm creating here. Now I'm going to add another button at the bottom of this page. And this button will be used to update their profile information. And similar to our register account workflow that we created, we're going to create a new workflow when this button is hit. And in this case, we're going to, instead of creating an account, we're going to make changes to an existing thing. Now, the thing we'll be making changes to is the current user. And from here, you can pull in any particular data fields that you want to change and match them with the input fields that we've just added. So in this case, I might want to update the user's name with the name field that we've just added. And that's all the fields that I've added myself. But if you had things like a profile photo or the credit card information, you could store that data there. And then back on our settings page here, we can start to add in initial content here. Now, this initial content can pull in the current user's name. So that way it's continuously stored there. So when a user goes to this page, they'll see their existing name there. So they can see what data is already recorded. And if they want to change it and update it, they can make those changes appropriately. But this is a nice and easy page to create, and it is quite essential within certain products, particularly like Uber, where you are storing personal information. And then we can go back to our Notion page and tick off that we have created a feature to allow users to update their profile settings. Now that we've taken care of all of the housekeeping, it's time to jump into the fun part of this tutorial and really start to build out the actual user interface of the product that your users will interact with. And we'll start with the home page here. Now I've added in some sub features that we'll be adding in, like adding pickup and drop off locations, being able to calculate prices and display previews of prices, and then also just adding conditions for pricing algorithms. So if things like distances change or anything like that, you can customize pricing to suit accordingly. So if we jump back into our editor, we'll go over to our homepage here, and you can see I already have my map element on there from beforehand. And what we'll do is we will just add 2 new search boxes. Now, we're not going to add in input fields, although we are inputting an address. We're going to be using search boxes because Bubble can actually index addresses for you here. So if you click the choices style and hit geographic places, Bubble will automatically use the Google Maps API key that we connected and index any addresses that are registered on Google Maps. And we will call this search box the current address search box. And we'll just add a placeholder there that says where from. And then we will duplicate that. And we'll call this one a where to. And this will be a destination. I'll just stretch those out so they're the same length as our map. And you can start to see that is bringing together most of the interface that users will be able to see. And one other data type I'll be adding here is the current user's current address that they're registered at. So head back over to our database and add a current address, and we will save that as a geographic address. Now we can add in a marker on our map just so it adds a point of relevance when a user updates their current address. So we'll click on this element here and we'll choose to display the current user's current address. Now, in order to update the current user's address, we'll need to create a workflow here that registers when an element's input value is changed. Now, the input value is, of course, our search box's current address. And we'll want to make changes to a thing. That thing will be the current user. And we'll be updating their current address and adding the value of this search box. So whenever a user adds in their current address, it'll automatically show that on our map here. Now, the other thing we'll want to do is also show the destination address when a user adds in where they want to go to. So again, we will create a new workflow when a value is changed, and that value will be the destination search box. In this case, we will then want to display an element. We'll want to display a marker. We'll display it on our home map, and the address of this marker will be this search box's value. So now when a user adds in their current address, it'll show where it is on the map. And then when they add in their destination address they'd like to go to, it'll automatically update that and show where that location is on the map as well. One of the other core features we'll need to add is a pricing estimate, or even just a price for that matter, to this trip. So a user can determine how much it's going to cost them before they book that. Now, we'll be using an input field here, and I'll explain why in a second. So this input field allows you to store data within it and then send that to workflows, which we'll be needing to do in order to create certain features, like sending that into a price of a ride itself when we create that data type. Now, we don't want this price to display as soon as the page is loaded. In fact, we'll only want it to display once the user has added in both their addresses, and then we'll want to determine what the price is and display that there. So we're going to go ahead and untick that this element is visible on our page load. And then we're going to just quickly update the name of this to be, I'll call it a trip price. And this is where we're going to start to add some estimates based on the distance of locations between the destination and also the pickup zone. So we'll go ahead and in our initial content field add in a $, and then we will also add the current user's destination's address. And then we'll measure the distance from our user's origin address, which is of course the current address from our search box. Now I'm going to measure this in metric, so I am in kilometers here. So that's going to show the actual distance between those fields. And what we want to do is to register a dollar amount for those distance. And this is where you can start to create formulas within Bubble. So from here, I can add in formulas like a multiplication, and I can say that for every kilometer that this Uber trip travels, I want to charge 1.5 times the rate of the kilometers. So if a user goes 1 kilometer, we'll charge them $1.50. And of course, you'll probably also want to start adding different pricing parameters based on the different distances that a user might travel. After all, if a user travels a shorter distance, you might charge a little bit more than 1.5 times the amount. And if a user travels a longer distance, like 100 kilometers, you might actually just want to charge them $1 a kilometer, because that might be a bit more of a fair price. So in our conditions, we'll head over here, and this is where you can start to create almost like a bit of an algorithm based on pricing parameters. The first thing we'll need to do though is make this input field visible. And if you can remember just before I disabled this from showing, we're actually going to want to only show this when the current user's search box address, its value is not empty, and when their destination input is also not empty. And we'll head over and say this element is visible and tick that. Now, when a value is added into both of these input fields, this field will pop up with a price ready to go for a user to review. Now, if you want to start building out different conditions for different pricing structures, you can do so by adding in a couple of conditions here. So much similar to the one that I've just created. So you could say that when the destination's address, its value, distance from the origin address, which is the current address, its value in kilometers, is greater than or less than, in this case, let's say it's less than 10 kilometers. We'll want this text, this initial content, to be, let's say, $25. Now it will register whenever a trip is under 10 kilometers. It'll register that it is $25. And anything over that, it will go back to its default of timesing the distance by 1.5. And of course, you can start adding different thresholds and parameters here. So you could say that when it's less than 10 kilometers but greater than 5 kilometers, it would charge a certain amount. But you can really start to see that coming together nicely. And we'll head over to our development environment and see what this looks like in action. So over here, I can write where I'm traveling from. I am based in Brisbane, so I'm just going to say 160 Queen Street. And let's say I want to go to 200 Queen Street. Probably won't even be a kilometer. I will go to Melbourne. So that'll be quite a long trip. And you can see here that it is $2,000 for that trip because it is quite a bit of a distance. But let's say I want to go to 161 Queen Street in Brisbane. This will then default to $25 that we mentioned before. And that is how you can build your own pricing algorithm and also build out the, core feature to Uber itself. So we'll go back to my Notion template here, and I'll tick off that I have built my homepage. I have added in the option for custom pickup and drop off locations. I've calculated the price and displayed them as a preview. And I've also added conditions for a pricing algorithm. And that is all I have time for in this tutorial today. If you wanted to check out the rest of the course, I'd recommend clicking the link in the description below and purchasing the full course. Throughout this, I'll be walking you through the step-by-step instructions to complete the rest of our build. You can also get access to a suite of Bubble tutorials where you'll learn how to rebuild other popular products. If you'd like to also get started learning how to build some other popular products, I'll include some suggested videos in a moment that you can also check out. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to hit that subscribe button if you'd like to see any more helpful tutorials like this to help you on your Bubble journey.